On the night of July 14, 2021, endless rain turned this stream into a massive flood.
Und das glaubt dir doch kein Mensch. Jetzt, das bricht alles ein. Ich glaube, ein ganzes Hausstück ein.
Das Wasser stand hier mehrere Meter über unserem Kopf.
It was a once-in-a-century flood, and it turned the Ahr Valley into a huge experiment in how to prepare for the next big one. Because while building back, people here have been working out many small and big fixes so that this can never happen again. There's a lot of construction work going on here. This is where the flood came through 5 years ago. The total rainfall for an entire month in 2 days. It washed away cars, houses, trees, piled them up against bridges, and once they broke, the wave rolled on with even greater force. The Ahr River runs over 85 kilometers from a mountainous region into the Rhine River in western Germany. On its way down, the water killed 135 people and razed many parts of the valley to the ground. Especially here, in the town of Bad Neuenahr-Ahrweiler. This all looks very makeshift. I'm here to meet the people who are building back better.
Hallo. Guten Tag. Hallo.
Some of whom barely survived the flood 5 years ago.
Genau, ja. Da wir halt auch nah an der Ahr gewohnt haben, sind halt die Nachbarn und halt ich unter anderem halt auch immer wieder zur Ahr gegangen und haben halt die Ahr beobachtet. Um 22:30 Uhr habe ich gemerkt, dass das gewaltig am Steigen war, das Wasser. Man hat gehört, da kommt was auf einen zu. Und in dem Augenblick, also praktisch in dieser Sekunde, habe ich mich zur Straße gedreht, wo wir wohnen. Und da kam das Wasser schon reingeschossen. Das kam praktisch von allen Seiten.
She lived just 50 meters from the river back then, in a neighborhood like this one. She didn't want to show us the place. That's still too painful. But she did send these videos of how it started.
Ich bin dann halt eben zu unserem Haus reingelaufen, weil halt mein Sohn noch am Schlafen war. Und den habe ich dann aus dem Bett gerissen. Und wir haben uns dann eben durch das Wasser gekämpft. Da kamen halt schon allerhand uns entgegen, Mülltonnen geäst und was weiß ich nicht alles. Zwischendurch wirklich habe ich meine Kraft verloren, habe auch zu meinem Sohn gesagt, wir schaffen das nicht mehr.
That was before the local government asked her and everyone else to evacuate. Around the same time, a police helicopter was filming the scenes in the valley from above. People are sitting on rooftops, using their flashlights to signal for help. For most of them, it didn't come that night. Alexandra Wiemer made it to her mom's house, a little up the hill. And even here, the flood was still passing by the next morning. When she got back to her own home, nothing was the way it used to be. That's also why in her new home, a couple of things are different.
Also hier wurde halt auch die Mauer nachträglich gebaut und recht weit hochgezogen. Da unten befinden sich die Kellerfenster und da wurde halt auch dann nachträglich die Schotten angebracht. Und wenn alle Stricke reißen, haben wir dort immer noch Sandsäcke, die wir dann halt auch immer noch vor die Fenster legen können. Das ist halt vom langen Liegen.
Sehr sandig und sehr schwer.
Ja, genau.
Und warum liegen die jetzt hier draußen schon so bereit?
Das sind die Vorsichtsmaßnahmen, dass wenn was wäre, dann können wir schnell handeln.
But this new home is just as close to the river as her old one. Warum haben Sie sich denn entschieden, hier dennoch in der Nähe der Ahr zu wohnen?
Weil es schön ist, am Wasser zu wohnen und weil ich keine Angst habe, hier weiter zu wohnen an der Ahr. Punkt.
She says that all the flood survivors she knows have stayed in town. Then if people don't move away from the river and the risk of another flood, they have to adapt to it.
Laut.
Judging from all the construction work going on in this town, they are. 5 years ago, 80% of the town was flooded. Like here, where the water breached the medieval wall and submerged the historic old town. Hermann Josef Pelgrim is one of the organizers of this new extra wall.
Hier soll jetzt eben ein künstliches Gestein, also hier eine Prallwand, eben den Fluss abhalten, in die Altstadt auszubrechen. Das ist schon eine sehr stark verankerte Mauer mit Bohrpfählen, 1,20 Meter im Durchmesser, 15 Meter tief gegründet.
This way the water can't get under the wall either and make it collapse from below. Das heißt, es prallt ab,
Es prallt ab,
fließt da weiter.
fließt da weiter.
Aber fließt es dann nicht da rein oder
ja,
ist dann da nicht die Schwachstelle?
Sie haben völlig recht.
This is the same weak spot 5 years ago. The water crashed right into the fire station. You can still see the tiles from where the truck washroom used to be. Und die Feuerwehr konnte dann helfen oder konnte sie nicht helfen?
Nein, die konnte hier nicht helfen. Das stand ja hier 1 Meter hoch, das Wasser. Die Feuerwehr hier an dieser Stelle war funktionsunfähig.
To avoid this, the new fire station is being built on the other side of the river, where the force of the water is less intense during a flood. And it's being built on underground stilts so that the station will not collapse. The town is also setting up green spaces with underground trenches. They help to catch and carry away water during heavy rain. And the 16 bridges that had been destroyed get upgraded. This medieval one was torn down by all the debris and cars that crashed into it. These bricks are all that's left of it. And this is the new one.
Diese Brücke wird auch im extremen Hochwasserfall nicht umfallen.
Auf gar keinen Fall.
Auf gar keinen Fall.
Because everything should fit underneath, water and debris. Other locations will soon get another kind of bridge that can be lifted up. The town is spending more than €1 billion on reconstruction. The money mostly comes from a fund set up by the German federal and state governments, but despite the huge effort here, there's a catch.
Das, was oben nicht aufgefangen wird, am Fluss unten ankommt. Insofern ist es eine Gesamtverantwortung.
So, let's go upstream. Driving up the river, I get the feeling it's not just how much came down here during the flood, but also that there's so little space everywhere. On this map from about 220 years ago, you can see that in many places we just saw, there was hardly anything back then. The army ended freely, sometimes with several arms at the same time. But then, as people moved into the valley, they channeled the river and built on its banks. This makes flooding more likely, which is exactly what happened in the place we are headed now. This used to be a camping ground, and now it's just completely empty. The water level here was among the highest during the flood 5 years ago. It rose to the same level as this church.
Das Wasser stand hier mehrere Meter über unserem Kopf. Und man sieht es noch beispielsweise an dem Gebäude dort gegenüber, an Verschmutzungen, die noch nicht bereinigt wurden.
More than 7 meters above ground, the town was submerged in water. Most of it was rebuilt, but not this piece of land. This man, Bruno Büchele, has got totally different plans for it.
Man sieht es jetzt auch hier ja schon, wie die Böschung nach unten geht und der ganze Uferbereich flacher wurde. Hier, wo jetzt abgesinkt ist, in der Vergangenheit waren auch so alte Flussverläufe.
The area gives the river space to flood now and is an experiment to let nature take over again. The same thing is being done all along the river, including in the town we went to earlier. Büchele says that locals along the river sold parts of their land to make space for these plains, with grasses, shrubs and trees. Others were skeptical because uprooted trees blocked and damaged bridges during the flood. The plan for the river course now is a mix of narrow spaces where flood can pass through without water and debris pooling up, and then those wide and wild areas where the water can spread and slow down. Makes sense to me, but that's still not all.
Wir können hier am Gewässer durch das Aufweiten, durch das mehr Raum geben, viel Vorsorge betreiben, aber vollständig wird es natürlich erst, wenn auch im Rückhaltemaßnahmen hier technisch den Abfluss reduzieren, der hier ankommt.
Rückhaltemaßnahmen. Isn't German such a beautiful language? It literally means holding back measures. And to see what that means, we need to drive up the river a little further and into a side valley. Okay. Looks a little boring, to be honest. But apparently, that's a really big deal. We've got a stream Down here we've got a little dam with a gate, and then all of this is a big low-lying plain. So when it rains really heavily and that stream grows bigger, the water will fill that plain and not hit the village. Simple as that. This is the basin during the flood 5 years ago. 40 million liters of water. It did leak a little, but didn't break, just like a second basin outside this town. And that's what saved their asses, a local official told me. And because they work so well, 17 such retention basins are now planned along the Ahr and its tributaries. Just way, way bigger, like 100 times bigger. This example from another place in Germany shows what they could look and work like. It's a 28 meters high dam that includes tunnels for road traffic and wildlife. In normal times they are open, but when a flood is brewing, they are closed and the water is retained. If it all goes to plan, construction of such dams in the Ahr Valley will cost more than 1.5 billion euros and take decades to build. Provided nobody forgets about the flood. Plans for such basins were already made after another devastating flood in 1910, so more than a century ago. But those old plans were never put into practice. The money was used on a nearby racing course, the Nürburgring instead, as if the flood hadn't happened.
Risk seems quite abstract and distant. We hear about it, we read about it, but we never think we are going to experience that.
But according to climate vulnerabilities expert Indu Murthy, major floods happen all the time and in many parts of the world. In the past months alone, in China, Southern Africa, Indonesia and Afghanistan, floods kill at least 3,000 people and destroy billions of dollars in infrastructure every year.
When we say a 1 in 100 year flood, it does not mean it will not happen for 100 years. What we are meaning is that there's 1% chance in any given year for that magnitude of flood to happen.
The science is clear that the risk is increasing as cities grow bigger and global warming accelerates. Warm air holds more moisture, which makes rain more heavy. But just as the risk is known, so are the defenses.
Many effective measures are also low cost, whether we are talking about early warning systems, community preparedness, or land use zoning and nature-based solutions. They're dramatically cheaper per life saved.
There are countries and cities from Bangladesh to Singapore and the Netherlands that use all these measures to protect themselves. And it's very much what we see happening in the Ahr Valley too. So what happens when the next flood is brewing here? If it all goes to plan, the retention basins along the Ahr and its tributaries are the first line of defense. This chart shows how much the water levels would drop if the basins were closed and filled compared to the flood 5 years ago. In short, quite a lot. Further down the river, like in Altenburg, it could safely spill over into those new floodplains. And with new walls and bridges in Bad Neuenahr-Ahrweiler, the water would largely just run off, while the firefighters head out safely from their station on stilts. And Alexandra Wiemer, what would she do?
Dann würde ich direkt in die Weinberge rennen, aus der Erfahrung raus, also das, um uns zu retten, um unser Leben zu retten.
Und wie lange dauert das von hier aus ungefähr?
Das ist nicht so lang, also wenn wir uns beeilen, mal 4 Minuten.
4 minutes, that can make all the difference. I'm honestly impressed by how much is happening here along this river. Certainly a lot to learn from. Big, expensive efforts, too expensive for many countries, but also small, low-tech fixes. When the next flood comes, we will know whether it has paid off. Is flooding a risk where you live? And if so, how do you prepare? Let us know in the comments below, subscribe for more videos like this and check out dw.com for more stories.